It's my nerd world, and welcome to it, a Star Wars podcast. On the show this week, now we know that Hayden Christensen is back in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, but is he also coming back in another Disney Plus live-action series? I have details for you. Mandalorian Season 3 leaks that we'll share, more backstory on Snoke from a recently released book, and your listener feedback. Let's not waste any more time and get to this week's show.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now you're coming together. Is your undoing.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny. The Force will be with you.
Always.
My Nerd World.
It is a Star Wars podcast, and I am your host, Jon Justice. Glad you're with the show again this week. And listening to that opening, the intro that I used from the Rise of Skywalker trailer, it really gets me in the mood to go watch that movie. I haven't actually watched a lot of Star Wars over the course of the past couple of weeks, dealing with some personal issues, been really, really busy, and has spent quite a bit of time over the past couple of days actually watching Dune, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But this is a Star Wars podcast, so we'll stick to Star Wars news. And speaking of Star Wars news, some rather interesting and albeit kind of surprising details about Hayden Christensen's return to Star Wars dropped, and let's get into it.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So, Rosario Dawson, who plays Ahsoka and has in the live-action Mandalorian, right, for Season 2, we know that we have an Ahsoka series that's coming up, and we are, speculating that the series will revolve around her search for Thrawn based off of what happened in The Mandalorian Season 2, and of course as an extension of Rebels. Well, she tweeted earlier this week, Sky Guy, ... they know, ! See you soon, Snips. Now, of course, Snips and Sky Guy, those are the two nicknames for Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano. Well, then, The Hollywood Reporter came and dropped a rather big story, and a lot of different outlets picked up on it too. Hayden Christensen returning to Star Wars with Ahsoka series. Rosario Dawson is starring as fan-favorite character Ahsoka Tano. The actor will reprise the role of Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, in Ahsoka, the latest, also known as Darth Vader, in the latest Star Wars live-action series from Lucasfilm and Disney+. Multiple sources tell The Hollywood Reporter. Rosario Dawson is starring as the fan-favorite character, Ahsoka Tano, the Jedi Knight survivor, popular on the animation side of Star Wars, who made her live-action debut, as we mentioned, in the second season of The Mandalorian. Now, plot details are being kept in the far reaches of the Outer Rim, according to the article, but it is known that longtime Star Wars lightsaber wielder Dave Filoni is writing the series and executive producing with Jon Favreau. It's unclear how Skywalker, or for that matter, Vader, will figure into Ahsoka, which, like The Mandalorian, is set 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, and therefore after Vader's death. Now, people were immediately jumping on flashbacks. A lot of theories going around that in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series we'll be getting flashbacks of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin during the Clone Wars. However, there's a much different issue with potential of doing flashbacks in Ahsoka simply because of the timeline. And Rosario Dawson, I suppose you could age her down, right, using the CGI technology, but when they finally depart each other, right, there is quite a bit of Ahsoka is quite a bit younger. So the Hollywood Reporter jumps on what a lot of fans jumped on and what I also believe is most likely going to be the case. The character of Tano, as we mentioned, was the Padawan of Apprentice of Skywalker, so the latter's appearance in the series could be in the form of flashbacks, but knowing a thing or two about how the Force works, sources also posit the theory the character could be a Force ghost, which is really interesting because just this week in a recently released comic, Anakin Skywalker did show up as a Force ghost. As a matter of fact, I didn't have it in the notes, but here it is. Yeah, a very special character reprises their role in Shadow of Vader's Castle number 5, and that would be the Force ghost of Anakin Skywalker. So, getting back to the Hollywood Reporter article, Disney was as silent as Darth Maul when asked to comment. Production is due to begin in early 2022. Christensen famously played the future Vader in 2002's Star Wars Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Fans went wild when it was announced that Disney's Investor Day in December of 2020 that the actor was returning to the role for Obi-Wan Kenobi, the live-action series starring Ewan McGregor. So this would make a heck of a lot of sense to have Anakin Skywalker show up as a Force ghost, helping Ahsoka Tano in the Ahsoka series. I think anything beyond that would, I don't know, it could potentially diminish the impact of Hayden Christensen returning to the role in the Kenobi series. But again, I just think in terms of the storytelling and the timeline, you could age these actors down. It would be very easy to do so. Both of them look relatively young now. Hayden Christensen, definitely you could age him down very easily, and I'm sure they will if these potential flashbacks show up in the Kenobi series. I really like the idea of bringing back the Force Ghost into the series. Not that we haven't seen that. We obviously saw that in The Rise of Skywalker with Luke Skywalker, spoiler alert. But I do like the idea that we continue to go back to the mythology that we all know so well. And given how close that relationship was between Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka, it makes all the sense in the world to me that he would appear. And I also like the idea of getting a bit of closure on that whole situation, given the way that story did play out in the Clone Wars and obviously in Rebels as well. For those that haven't watched it, go watch Rebels. You will not be disappointed. So what I also love about this whole thing, and what gets me not excited but encouraged for the future, is how embraced Hayden Christensen is, how much the fandom is embracing his return. Somebody else, I think it was Ken Knapsack on Force Center, had made this comment on a podcast over the course of the past year, and I tend to agree. I think that the fandom will, on a long enough timeline, look back very favorably on the sequel trilogy, more so than they do now. Just in the same way that the fandom looks back more fondly and has more respect for the prequels than they did before. Not to say you ignore their faults or their flaws, but that is to say that you do go and appreciate them for what they are. I love those films, and I know so many people had a hard time with them, but I think, again, on a long enough timeline, when you kind of parse the fandom out and you get further down the road and all you're kind of left with are the more hardcore fans, and the negative proponents to the sequel trilogy kind of fall by the wayside, you'll still have people that will have their problems with The Last Jedi, but I think that they'll be more willing to go and overlook them to see the story at its core rather than the nitpicking that takes place now. And I just think it's great that we're going to have more connectivity with all of the saga. That includes having, if we do get Anakin as a Force ghost, I like the fact that it sort of legitimizes that special edition change that was made in Return of the Jedi. That every single time I wait too long and my little Grogu Bluetooth speaker ends up turning off in the middle of the podcast. But so many people had a hard time with Hayden Christensen replacing the original version of Anakin Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi. To have him return in Ahsoka, and even wearing the same robes that he had on during that special edition shot at the end of Return of the Jedi, I think would really go a long way to continue to connect all of the content that is within the canon. As always, what do you think? Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
So as mentioned, as we get into some leaks and spoilers here, so pitch off for a few minutes if you don't want to be spoiled. But as has been mentioned a few times on the most recent episodes of my Nerd World of Star Wars podcast, Making Star Wars is back. Jason Ward has his YouTube channel after dealing with some issues online and being banned from Reddit, whatever. He is back and continues to provide leaks of upcoming content. This week, it comes in the form of The Mandalorian Season 3. Making Star Wars has released new details on Season 3 of The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is preparing to film a sequence for the third season of the series. The sequence is currently casting actors and finding creative ways to use fan costumers to fill around 75 different Mandalorian suits of armor. Now, what'll be interesting as we get into more details here, I can't help but wonder if we're going to get a return to Mandalore in live action that will kind of wrap up the story that we got at the end of the Clone Wars Season 7, right? With the Darksaber returning and somebody going and taking, the highest position of Mandalore with the Darksaber, and I wonder if this could be part of that. Just wanted to toss it out there. Just, again, thinking of many, many Mandalorians, I immediately thought of the Clone Wars of Season 7. The featured Mandos will be played by local actors, whereas the background moments will use costumers from the fandom. These 75 Mandos are also going to do some armor swapping of pieces to create even more variants to be seen on screen. Jason Ward apparently saw samples, or his leaker saw samples in various forms. Some of the armors have a Boba Fett vibe. Their armor is a patchwork with different colors and pieces. The next section is described as rumors, while the previous one Jason called facts. Disparate individual Mandalorians from around the galaxy answer a call Din Djarin sends out to the galaxy for help. Din Djarin's legend is growing throughout the galaxy, as rumors of a true Mandalore returning is heard throughout the galaxy. When Din makes the call, it is answered by more Mandalorians than you could have ever imagined. He saw a few pieces of a red armor from Maul's Mandos in the Clone Wars. There were also some clan symbols he recognized and some he never saw before. He thinks this is a unifying moment for Mandalore where the past is left behind and they move forward. But of course, there's a lot of context missing here. So, it'll be interesting to see what the Mandalorian does if they don't have Grogu involved. That was one of the things that I keep kind of going back to when I think about The Mandalorian Season 3. And it's interesting from the angle, at least from my perspective, when we went into The Mandalorian not knowing we were going to get Grogu. And even when we're first introduced to Grogu in those first few episodes of Season 1, you're not even 100% sure if he's going to be in the entire series. And of course, he ends up becoming, a second, figure. He ends up becoming all important to that series. And so we have seen a few episodes that have obviously worked without Grogu. But, the big question has always been, what is the Mandalorian going to be without that particular character if he isn't in it? And I think it's a pretty easy fix if it's even needs to be a fix. I mean, there's so many stories that can be told, and focusing back on Din Djarin and sort of shifting the perspective as opposed to a lone wolf and cub. Now we potentially, right, just kind of riffing off of these leaks, have a figure that is, like the leak said, becoming a legend within the galaxy and, growing to go and fight a particular cause. You fill the gap with a different perspective in the storytelling. As always, what do you think? drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. All right, let's get into a bit of news. And I dig this. I know a lot of people have their problems with the sequel trilogy, as we talked about, especially The Rise of Skywalker, and with what happened in Snoke. However, Disney and Lucasfilm are kind of going out of their way to clear some things up, and we have some new details on the background of Snoke.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, from Digital Spy, Star Wars finally confirms what the point of Snoke was right from Palpatine himself. So I trimmed up some of the beginnings of the article, but this is going off of what is in the book, as we talked about last week, and provided a few details. Star Wars, The Secrets of the Sith. Okay, so we know that, Snoke was created by Palpatine, but we didn't really know beyond that, right? Didn't have a ton of details beyond that. Secrets of the Sith does kind of go out of its way to provide some of those details. It recounts the history of the Sith in Palpatine's own words, and he doesn't avoid the failures. Now, we already knew stuff about his consciousness transferring into a new body on Exegol when the Empire fell at the end of Return of the Jedi. But what we really didn't know was why the Sith Eternal pivoted from making a Palpatine clone to making Snoke. Well, it turns out that it's all tied into the fact that they were a bit useless. When their clones kept failing, as we already knew, right? His son being one that he kept alive, that one he called his son that was a clone of him, right? Palpatine needed to come, that ended up being Rey's father's what I'm driving at. Palpatine needed to come up with a solution to set the stage for his dramatic comeback. Palpatine writes, "To continue my plans for total galactic domination, I would need a form worth of my might," he writes. "Unable to leave Exegol, I would have to spread my influence across the galaxy through a less direct means." Those means turned out to be Snoke, another being that Palpatine's followers had created as part of their genetic experiments. Although his body proved unworthy of containing my dark essence, Snoke's nature sensitivity to the Force would make him a powerful puppet nonetheless, he continues. Through my manipulation of Snoke, I began gathering forces, building an army capable of opposing the New Republic that had risen in my absence. Through Snoke, I would make certain that the First Order would be mine to control. Not that Palpatine would ever let Snoke retain control of the First Order when his followers finally managed to create a body that would contain him. If anything, Snoke's shock death in The Last Jedi saved Palpatine a job as when he finally rose again. We doubt that the Sith Lord would let Snoke live to potentially challenge him. As he notes, Snoke was a temporary measure at best, but he didn't exactly count on the Sith Eternal's continual failure to create a body worthy of my infinite might. This would eventually come in the form of Rey, the daughter of the only clone that survived. Palpatine knew this clone had no connection to the Force, but chose to let it live, as he thought that Palpatine's blood would come in useful one day. Now, I'm sure that there will be fans that will take the angle of, Disney is retconning and they're trying to explain the reason why Palpatine came back in The Rise of Skywalker because it wasn't... Okay, whatever. Okay, I'm not going to go that route. I dig this. Could they have included something like this in the movie to add a little bit more depth? Sure. But as I've talked about many times on the podcast, ambiguity is a thing in Star Wars. It always has been, and it probably always will be. Ancillary material, canon material, and books and other content always goes and fills in the gaps of and answers questions that we didn't have in the movies themselves. So from that angle, I really, really like this added perspective to this. And it almost requires, and I'm looking forward to going back and watching the sequel trilogy again from this angle, it requires sort of a shift in narrative of the story, wherein we're kind of under the assumption that Snoke was building this brand new thing, which he was in the First Order to challenge the New Republic. Really, it was just a straight-up extension of what the Empire was with Palpatine pulling the strings. And so, for me, it enhances my enjoyment of watching the movies, just shifting my sort of narrative of what I thought of these films and what I thought the storyline was, and thinking, okay, Palpatine has been, as Leia said in The Rise of Skywalker, in the shadows from the very beginning. This was actually a very true extension of what took place in the original trilogy, and then obviously going back all the way to the prequels. And for me personally, I think that really, really works in the narrative and the storytelling. I am a bit of a Star Wars apologist, I'll admit that, but I like it. And I like the fact that we're getting more details in this ancillary material, because as I said, this is the way that Star Wars has always done their storytelling. It's never fully explained in the films. There is always a level of detail that is brought forward in ancillary material, and what's happening right now post The Rise of Skywalker is no different. And I really like the fact that Lucasfilm is taking the time to go and sort of add this to it for fans like myself, and hopefully fans like you that enjoy the sequel trilogy. I like the fact that they're going in and sort of filling a bit of this in. This is where to me it sounds like they are listening to a bit of the fandom. Fandom complaints, why did you bring Palpatine back? All right, let's go ahead and include some canon material that adds another layer of detail to this. And I love this idea that, Palpatine's been there. He's hanging out on Exegol this whole time. It makes sense why the Star Destroyers look like they do, because he's still sort of got an original trilogy Palpatine mindset, right? I'm just kind of riffing off of a few things. Whereas, the First Order had its little subtle differences, but still harkened very much back to what the Empire looked like. This all allows it to make a lot more narrative sense, and for that, I really, really dig it. I may have to actually go and pick up this book. It sounds pretty cool.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, you can always email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or drop a comment up on YouTube as well. Got a couple of listener feedback to share with you this week. Friend of the show, Shlomo, says, in light of my commentary about how Vader's helmet doesn't align at the end of Rogue One to the beginning of A New Hope, Shlomo says, Vader's helmet was exposed to the vacuum of space at the end of A New Hope. The paint and finish was frost spladed. So basically saying that at the end of, I think he meant at the end of Rogue One. At the end of Rogue One, he's exposed to the vacuum of space when he's standing there in the docking bay of the ship as Princess Leia's ship takes off, right? And so therefore the vacuum of space ended up weathering it rather quickly. You know what, Shlomo? I'll take it. I'm down with that. All right, J.O.B. writes this. If they did a New Hope novel from Obi-Wan's perspective, they could address the fight with Vader, talking about how the fight in A New Hope doesn't really align with the other fighting that takes place in all the other films. I think they should say that both Obi-Wan and Vader were so powerful in the Force that during the fight, they were also using the Force to push, pull, and crush each other, similar to what Rey and Kylo did in The Rise of Skywalker, stopping the lightsabers from sticking them. That's why the fight was slow and labored, because the real fight was the Force abilities. Yeah, I can dig it. I like it. Thanks for the comment. And as always, anybody else who would like to write in, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or again, drop a comment up on YouTube. And that wraps up the show this week. Check out Dune if you're a science fiction fan. If you're not watching Foundation on Apple Plus, I definitely recommend that as well. And if you're looking for some new reading, I am hard at work on Book 7 in the EMBARK series, but Books 1 through 6 are available right now on Amazon.com. And you can pick up the opening trilogy, Book 1, Treasure in Darkness Book 2, and The Vanishing War Book 3 in ebook. You can get all three books for just $2.99 right now at Amazon.com. And hardbacks are now available for all 6 books. I don't think I've mentioned that yet, but there are hardbacks available now for all 6 books. Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or you can go on over to mynerdworld.net. All right. I hope you have a fantastic week. I think I'm going to watch some Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker and my NASCAR race later on this afternoon. That's at Sunday. And I will be back for another episode this coming weekend. And as always, I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe, and that you enjoyed listening to this week's episode as much as I did recording it.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.